Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our annual summit. It's too bad that we're doing this virtually, although there are a lot of advantages. I'll give a few more moments to make sure that everybody has logged on, but I'm Dan Barstow, and it's great to see some new faces here and some who many have been here before. I think we're up to what 48 or more. Sam or Diane, do you know how many we actually have?
Right around 48.
48, terrific. So why don't we give a couple more minutes for people to join in, make sure you're technically connected and that, there are no problems coming up. We do have Justin Amato serving as tech support. Thank you, Justin. You're always doing a great job with that. And we've got other folks here, Sam, Diane, Mike, and Debbie, who are serving as on-site support. So I'll just, why don't I just stop for another, just a couple minutes to make sure that everybody comes on okay. And can you, let's see, I think we have 22 are now logged on of our 48, is that correct?
That appears to be correct, yes. And I can just do a few housekeeping things too.
Sure, why don't you go ahead.
For the most part, if you have a question or you want to have some discussion in any of the topics that we're talking about, just raise your hand or you can type it into the question bar. This is being recorded, so that we'll try to get all those answered so that we have that for the recording as well. And when we have the Q&A at the end or some discussion time, we'll open up everybody's mics. If you choose to have your camera, you'll have to give permissions and things. But again, we do have Justin for technical, so he can help us go through all of that.
Okay. So I think we're now up to 26, and why don't I give it still a couple more minutes, but for those who have just logged on, thank you for joining our summit. We're glad you're all used to how to do all this online stuff. We've got this organized in GoToWebinar, which gives us a little more flexibility for showing slides and for shifting around and letting everybody have their part of this. So it's pretty good technology. It seems to be solid for us.
Okay, Justin, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. You can just make sure everybody's got a good view of the agenda, an overview for the next 3 days.
So I think when we get up to 30, I'll dive in.
See, Dan, if you're counting the attendees and the staff, our numbers are pretty close.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking up there. Attendees 28 out of 501 max. I don't know if we'll get all that high. I hope, by the way, that many of you did get a chance to log into the STEM portion of the ISS R&D conference last Thursday. Several of the panelists actually did a very fine presentation there. We really appreciate your joining in. We'll do a little bit of a reprise of some of the content from that today, but I hope that many of you were able to join in on that. Well, it looks like we're stabilizing here at 28. So shall I just go ahead?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, so again, I'd like to welcome everybody to our annual summit. We have had these, of course, in person for several years, and it's a terrific opportunity to hug and be close to everybody, but don't want to do any hugging these days. So we'll do it all virtually. We really appreciate your signing in and doing the 2 hours today, and then 2 hours tomorrow and 2 hours the next day. We did a little estimate, and we figured 2 hours is about as much energy as sitting in front of a computer as everybody can sustain. With that, the first thing I'd like to do is actually introduce our host for this meeting. Samantha Thorstensen is not just the host for the meeting, but as some of you may know, I'm retiring in a month at the end of November, and in fact, at the end of October, Sam becomes the new director of the STEM education program. and the new head of the Space Station Explorer Consortium, and the person who is running the logistics and details of this. So first of all, I want to say, it's a bit emotional to make a transition. And of course, I want to thank everybody who's been doing all the work. But most importantly, I want to thank and congratulate Sam, who I think will do a spectacular job moving us forward into the future with, taking the whole program higher and higher. So Sam, why don't I turn it over to you at this point?
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. You have left quite the legacy, and we are only going to build on this amazing work that you've done this far. So I'm excited for the future and what we can all do together in the consortium. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Dr. Mike Roberts. Some of you might know him, some of you may not, but he's going to do a nice welcome for you. I know originally we had Ken on, but I think Ken might be joining us tomorrow instead. So thank you, and I will pass it over to you, Dr. Mike.
Thanks, Samantha. Yeah, sorry, Ken and I apologize for the last minute agenda change. Ken wishes he could be with us today, but he had a scheduling conflict that cropped up. So we are switching our days. I'm going to join Ken tomorrow a little bit though. So if you get too much of me today, you can just dial in for the Ken session tomorrow when he kicks it off and then go on. I wanted to just take this opportunity to welcome everyone back again. My role as the acting chief scientist of the International Space Station National Laboratory gives me an opportunity to work a lot with investigators and educators, and just a small opportunity to work with students. And obviously, I would be remiss if I didn't say that nothing gives me more pleasure in the mission that we have in managing the International Space Station National Lab than to see the excitement on the faces of students when they have the opportunity to think about space, and even more importantly, to conduct science investigations that have the opportunity to go to the International Space Station. We've been very fortunate here at the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space to be working with our NASA colleagues for a little over 9 years now as managers of the International Space Station National Laboratory. And as you'll hear from Dan in just a few minutes, that only covers about half of the 20 years of continuous human presence in space, and the availability of the International Space Station to work not only as a research platform, but as a destination for imagination. So the International Space Station, like the organization that is in part responsible for its engineering excellence, NASA, and the many international partners who've provided facilities and provided crew to maintain a human presence in space through that time, have been unique in the history of humanity in being able to inspire us to go beyond the daily confines of our lives here on Earth. And the International Space Station, has a finite lifetime. There will be a point in the not too distant future when it's no longer sustainable to be operating as a platform in low Earth orbit. But NASA and commercial companies are working to develop new platforms and new capabilities to take its place and continue its mission going forward. And one of those critical missions will continue to be STEM education. So we are committed at the ISS National Laboratory to our STEM mission, utilizing not only the International Space Station, but platforms that will come after it. Because at the end of the day, we cannot do research and technology development, we cannot explore space without engaging younger generations in order to sustain that interest and that vision. And quite frankly, to help us replace the bad ideas that we thought were good ideas with new ideas as we move forward. This community of ambassadors and space station explorers, all the education partners that we work with, you do the heavy lifting for our organization. That in no way diminishes the extremely important role that Dan Barstow, Samantha Thorstensen, and Diane Matthews have had in building our SSE network and continuing to see it grow over each of the years. But we each understand that the most critical aspect of all that we do in the education forum relies upon the expertise and the experience that each of you as space station explorers bring to our community. So we are also, as just as we are extremely fortunate to have been working with NASA for these past 9 years as managers of the ISS National Lab, really relish the role and the contributions that you've made to the International Space Station and to our space exploration network based on the excellent work that you do. So I wanted to welcome everyone again to today's Space Station Explorers Summit. I think you'll have an opportunity to hear from Dan not only the great legacy upon which we all are building upon, but you'll be able to hear some exciting new ideas, some of them from you, some of them from us, and most of them community driven, that will lead us into the next great stage of exploration and education using space. I'm not alone in noticing that the year of 2020 has been challenging for many aspects, foremost among those the inability for us to travel and communicate face to face. We get a lot out of these virtual platforms, and we can certainly have the opportunity to engage and learn, but we're also missing something by the human-to-human contact that we have. So I look forward to the continuing discussions today. Ken Shields will be able to join us tomorrow, as will I. Be back again to talk a little bit more about some of the plans moving forward for the International Space Station National Lab. I look forward to hearing from you today and tomorrow, and then moving forward into Wednesday as well. And with that, I will turn it back over to Sam, Dan, and Diane. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mike. Awesome, Dan. Dan, it is all yours. I'm going to have Justin bring up your slides, and then Dan's going to be presenting some amazing work that he has done in the last few months of research and data collection on 20 years of student experiments using the station. All yours, Dan.
Yeah, thanks. You know, the first thing, though, I want to acknowledge, clearly, this is not a CASES project. This is a project of 44 members of the Space Station Explorers Consortium, the 1,000 ambassadors, and so many other people we work with. And I just want to, you know, normally in our summit, we have a chance for everybody to say hello and say some of the new and goods, and it's a little bit awkward in this situation. So I at least want to acknowledge, if you just bear with me for a moment, the registrants, who I think are all on board here now. We have several from the Challenger Learning Center Network, several from ARIS, the ham radio program. We have a bunch of folks from NASA. Thank you so much. The Chabot Center in Oakland, the Space Grant program. You know, Joby Cook represents them well. Boeing, I think Scott Copeland's here. Thanks, Scott. We have folks from Advancing X, from the Journal of Emerging Investigators. One new partner that you haven't met yet is with Helios Capital, and I'm glad that Michelle is joining us today. And I'll just bear with me as I go through. It's an impressive list: Space Kids Global, Paragon Tech, Twin Cities, and all the great work with Sci Girls and Sci Girls in Space. Liam has a few folks from the ISS Above program. Orion's Quest has a few folks. Boys and Girls Clubs are, of course, well represented. Genes in Space, thank you so much, Katie, and whoever else from your team's there. Jancy and SciArt Exchange. Lauren Milford, Dream Up. Dream Up is doing some outstanding work. Raspberry Pi Foundation, Matt, thanks for joining us. A couple of people from Magnitude.io. I think Kim is here from VHS Learning and the Space Station Academy. Patricia Tribe from Storytime from Space. I mean, it's a huge list. I'm sure I've missed somebody, but you know, just to give you a flavor for how many people are there. And I think it's important to say that because I'm about to do, for the next, you know, 20 minutes or so, share with you and then open up for discussion. So a study that we have just completed of the work that you all have been doing, not just during the era of the Space Station Explorers Consortium, about 5 years, nor the era of CASES, about 10 years, but the entire duration of the space station. These 20 years as of November 3rd or 4th, somewhere early November, when we actually celebrate these 20 years of continued human presence and 20 years of students doing experiments using the ISS. So next slide, please. We will this week release the report. It's like 44 pages. And by the way, many of you contributed to this. And I also want to thank, by the way, Cecil Alex, who is an intern who helped out with much of the underlying data collection. So thank you, Cecil, for doing that. But you'll be able to go to spacestationexplorers.org to get a full copy of the report. Next slide. So clearly, education is one of the major success stories of the space station. ISS inspires millions of students, and you can see many of your projects there: Zerobotics, ExoLab, Quest Institute, Tomatosphere, GeneSpace, and so on. There's no question we reach millions of students, and you know it's I think ISS, when you look at the role to promote science research, promote new business opportunities, and build on education, that education path is you know, victory there. But what does that really mean? Next slide. Of course, in getting into this, I want to thank again everyone who makes it so. The educators, all the work we've done in the conferences and so on, you materials and curriculum developers, the scientists who help promote this. So big thank you to everybody. Next slide. And of course, a big thank you to that great big International Space Station, now successfully these 20 years. So next slide. So what we did was to look at the Space Station Explorers Consortium, our 44 members, to see what, in fact, can we say more specifically about what kinds of things take place, what pathways to space, and so on. Next slide. Last year, I shared this slide that shows the total educational reach, including outreach, conferences. Storytime from Space is a major success here. We've gone from over 2,000 in 2013, when Diane Matthews was the lead person at that time, on through over the next several years, steady growth. Last year, reaching 5,600,000 people. That's a lot of people. Next. But the question we wanted to look at was more specifically about the students who do experiments, not just sort of watching or listening or doing a little classroom activity, but truly doing experiments using the International Space Station. Next. So we focused on 17 programs that actually engage students one way or another, from Ants in Space, one of the early programs, to EarthCam, to Tomatosphere. We looked at these 17 programs and contacted, several of you were part of this, contacted them. You give us quarterly reports that are kind of broad in scope. So what we needed was more specifically, what did you do? How many students? In what way did they participate? What kinds of experiments? Next slide. So we collected a lot of data. This included global reach, US reach. It included all years over these 20 and had a special focus on the most recent year. So what did we get from all of this data? What did we find out? Next slide. First thing is that actually we should feel very good. Our programs do achieve a remarkably good diversity. 45%, this in 2019, 45% of our students are minority, 46% are female. Next. A lot of this is the specific efforts that each of your programs do. For example, SSEP offers scholarships and special work with under-resourced districts to have them engage and participate in the program. Next. or programs like Higher Orbits that work with Boys and Girls Clubs and other under-resourced students around the country to help them develop skills and then launch some experiments. Next. Well, turns out that the actual number of students who participate in experiments is 2.6 million. That's a lot. If you go back a bit, in the Air Skylab that we saw last year, it was like 25 students. We're up to 2.6 million. Next slide. In fact, speaking of Skylab, this is, you may remember last year at the ISS R&D conference, we called on the first high school students who did experiments in space back in 1972 on the Skylab. And Bob Staley here in the center now is a senior official with the NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab. So clearly these experiences have an impact. They had 25 kids then, and now we've grown so much since then. Next. For example, EarthCam. You know, this is a program that has kids use a camera in the ISS Destiny Lab with a computer-controlled system. On the ground, they select targets underneath the orbital path. Then we uplink those target lists. It takes the pictures based on the date and timestamp, downlinks the images, and then the kids explore them. With 4 opportunities a year, with about 10,000 students per opportunity, and going back over maybe 15 years, I believe, they have reached 660,000 students who have participated in controlling a camera to take a picture at their request. 660,000. Next. Well, I think some of you who are really in the depths of these kinds of experiences will appreciate a distinction that we needed to make between what we call the core students and the adjunct students. If we take a program like Genes in Space, where every year one or a few students are the winners of a national competition, they're the ones who get to launch their experiments. And yet, there's so many other students who are putting in many hours, seriously working on proposals, looking at the data that comes back, and engage in a variety of real and in-depth ways. So what we concluded is that we needed to provide these 2 different counts. Yes, if you want to know who has actually launched or controlled an experiment, that's like 992,000. If you look at how many are what we're calling the adjunct, that extra support, truly engaged in depth, but not actually launching experiment, that's more like 1.5 million. Next slide. You know, so an example, I mentioned Genes in Space. Here's Anna Sofia Bogorayev. She has spent many hours with outreach, helping kids learn how to use the Genes in Space box and, you know, how to connect up, how to do proposals and so on. Next slide. Jeff Goldstein with the SSEP program will underscore the same point, that with many students trying to design experiments, figuring out, you know, making sure they get it right, not all of them get to launch, but they clearly are deeply engaged. Next slide. And that engagement covers the whole gamut, from proposing an idea to selection to flying and to coming back and disseminating their findings to others. Next. So the next finding I'd like to report on is that, in fact, each program offers a unique path to space. Whether you're controlling a robot or doing tomato seeds or sending up code for an experiment that you've designed to operate, there is quite a variety of these. Hunch has, and SSEP and Quest Lab are some that have some of the highest amount of, you know, diverse ways of getting into space. Next. We ended up concluding that there really were, broadly speaking, 3 different categories of access to space. One is when you launch an experiment. That's something like 8% who have actually launched an experiment. Now, the 35% are those who operate an experiment using remote control, and then the rest are doing some kind of a ground kit, either to do ground truthing or like the tomato sphere, doing the experiment on the ground to mirror what happens in space. Next. So to illustrate each of those, this is the Mixed-Sticks Lab. It's a very cost-effective way to design creative experiments. You can have liquids or solids in any of those 3 compartments. On orbit, the astronauts unhook them. That opens up, mix the chemicals, and then you bring the things back. You can compare how things operate in space and on the ground. Relatively low-cost experiment to get into orbit. Next. As an example of the remote control class of experiment is Zero Robotics, where students on the ground write code. They uplink it to the winners of this competition, uplink it to the robots, and then watch as they do, the motion, the 3 degrees of rotation and 3 degrees of motion, controlled by that code. They're now upgrading to the Astrobee robots. But it'll be the same concept of a remote control experiment. Next. And then that 3rd class, which is the ground experiments, here are some students doing the tomato sphere, where they get seeds that have been in space, seeds that haven't. They plant each, they don't know which it is, they monitor their growth, and then they submit the results to the tomato sphere project, who've actually concluded there is something like a 10% increase or decrease in height growth for those seeds that have been in space. Next. Overall, we've launched an incredible 793 actual experiments. Here you can see, and the full report, you can follow up with more details on this, but programs like ARIS and Hunch and NDC and Quest Lab and SSEP have all sent many experiments to space. Next. And as just one example of that, here's the Hunch package that Hunch set up, and notice how all the students have so proudly signed that. Next. So in the data collection from each of these programs, one type of data was numbers of students, another was the type of experiment, but a third was the number of hours that they work on their experiments. Now, you'll see that there are 6 of the programs that have students work over 100 hours, each student on an experiment. 3 of them are 200 hours plus. I mean, clearly this is not just an assignment from a teacher. This is a labor of love. This is students putting in many hours because of this incredible opportunity that they have. Next. I'll say that some of these things extend well beyond their initial experience. So these students who from Chicago, part of the original NDC National Design Challenge program, designing this experiment, they continue to, having launched one, to try to launch a replacement and to test some more. It's really gone on years that they've contained their enthusiasm for this project. Next. And as another example, this is a student, Bryce, who many of you actually might have met at one of our summits, who got so excited about the tomato sphere project, growing these space tomatoes, that he formed his own nonprofit called Space Dreamers, then went to various school districts in the area to try to encourage them and enable them to include more science, more space in their science courses. One of the assistant superintendents who I had met at one point moved to a different district. One of the first things he did was contact us to say, hey, how can I do these space things in this new district? So it's making a big impact. Next. In fact, if you multiply students by hours, we've had a stunning total of 27 million student hours. Now, student hours is kind of a weird concept. But if you take it as an hour of immersion as a metric of depth, this is really huge reach. that, you know, we couldn't possibly have imagined a few years ago, but it's clearly the data are confirming this. Next. And it's really been done through your all collective efforts. Each time we've met, we've used this 2-axis grid. Going across from left to right on the bottom are the hours per students, and up from on the, you know, from low to high on moving up on the numbers of students. We've tried to categorize each program in there, but all of you keep on moving things up to the right. So as one example, I mentioned Genes in Space. You know, they've gone well beyond having just one student being the winner. They now have a kit of the mini PCR they send out to districts. They have a large-scale teacher training and support program. I mean, that all of you have done this kind of moving to how do you get more kids and more depth. Next slide. And perhaps most impressive is that all of these programs have remarkable resilience. This chart, which goes from the top down with years 2000 through 2019, and these are all numbers of US students. Each of the programs, you'll see that ARIS, for example, started in 2000. Has continued on through your own creativity and ambition and drive, and somehow finding the finances, certainly finding the students, but sustaining the program. EarthCam in 2001, Tomatosphere, Zero Robotics had started in 2009. Their Orion's Quest has been going on since 2004. You know, all of these programs have this incredible longevity and just keep on growing. It's you know, a lot of experiments that go to space station by scientists, for example, might have some interesting idea and they do their experiment. It's wonderful. They learn from it and then they finish it. But you all just keep on doing more and more. It's just stunning. Next. And I will call out today specifically the ARIS program. November 3rd, the first set of Expedition 1 arrived and settled in on the space station. November 3rd, 2020. 10 days later, we had the first operational educational experiment. It was one of the very first experiments of any kind. Here are a bunch of volunteers, amateur radio operators, out of the love of learning, exploring, and teaching, who assembled the kit, worked out all the operational logistics, got it up to the space station, made sure that astronauts were trained in how to use the radio and had their license, worked with the ground network, and then 10 days after the first settling of the space station, ARIS started their program. I think it's major kudos to them for being so early in this process and sustaining it. And next slide. So finally, I just want to make the point that throughout we have seen all of the programs evolve with vision and passion. So here you see Quest Institute with their Quest experiment. You'll see Danny Kim there with that huge stack of boxes, each of which has an experiment. Well, so if we back up, Quest has done a heroic job early on of having certain teachers trained, know how to build their own what's called a 1/4 U. It's like a 4 of them fit into a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter standard size box. They design each custom built experiment. That program continues. That's incredibly impressive, but it's also expensive. So how do you bring that cost down and expand the reach? So the next thing they did was make a kit like this that now it has evolved to the extent this box is now available on Amazon, where a parent could buy this box, do the experiment, and you get to have 2 uplinks of data to control experiment and then downlink the results. I mean, think what we've come from having the National Design Challenge in 2013. That was a national competition and 3 teams won. Now we have, you know, anybody could do this. you know, and develop all the STEM skills and so on throughout all of this. So last slide. So I guess, you know, I'll stop there and we have some time for open discussion about this, because I'd really like to get any thoughts or reactions to this. You know, I think really the question for us is not just where we've been over these 20 years, but what does the future hold? Where are we going over the next 20 years? I'm sure we'll be just as astounded with what we can accomplish moving forward as we have getting to this point. But still, happy birthday, everybody, for the space station, and congratulations on all that you've accomplished. So why don't I guess I'll transfer it back to Sam, who will do the logistics of asking questions. And by the way, I just want to see, I see that a few more people have logged on. So I want to welcome those we didn't welcome before. Thank you for joining our summit. We really appreciate all that you do. But I also just want to restate something I said before. In fact, I'm going to retire at the end of November, and Sam will take over. So Sam's going to do a terrific job, effective November 1. She is the new head of STEM education at CASIS, the new head of the Space Station Explorers Consortium. I want to congratulate Sam. I know you're going to take this rocket higher and higher, and now I'll turn it over to you.
I'll say thanks again, Dan. You know, again, I love your analogy with the rocket. We're just the next phase of the rocket, right? We're just still moving forward. It's exciting stuff. For a discussion about the reports, I know we already had a couple people with the questions in the chat room, like, can we get this presentation? And yeah, we can definitely share out this presentation. These are being recorded, and at the end of the 3 days, we'll send out a nice email to everyone in the consortium with links to the recordings. But if you would like a direct PowerPoint, we can definitely contact with Dan and make sure we get that to you. But if you'd like to now, just raise your hand, especially if you're a participant in the attendees. We'll just unmute you so that you can chat. So is there anybody?
Yeah.
I'm looking through.
And let me also just say that we don't just want questions. We'd like your thoughts. I mean, this is a discussion. If this were our in-person summit, you know, I'd see all the hands raised and we just have an open discussion. That's what I really hope. I'm happy to answer questions, but really share thoughts or ideas or concerns or whatever.
And if you are a panelist, you have the, I guess, the ability just to go ahead and turn it off yourself. I know Justin's on here. He could probably give a little bit more insight to the technical aspects of that, but they have camera views. So I'm just looking. I'm about to say, I'm going to unmute. I was going to unmute Frank Bauer because I know with his legacy of this program and the time on station, I was like, he's definitely going to want to probably.
And before Frank comes on, we did these slides. We actually have had one update since these slides. The AIRS program it helped me better understand how to count the participants, and it actually significantly increases their numbers. So the actual report will be a little higher than you saw for AIRS's numbers.
It looks like Frank has himself muted, so he would have to unmute.
No, I was trying to get up. Can you copy me now?
We do, thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, it is pretty exciting to celebrate the 20th anniversary almost exactly with ISS. We're really looking forward to it. We've got some plans. Some of our celebrations aren't going to really happen till the mid-year. We're doing a year-long celebration on this, primarily because we're waiting for the Crew 1 to show up. We've got 3 amateur radio operators on that flight. But one thing I did want to share with everyone is that we've been doing some research on some of our students, and in particular, we were focusing on the first contact we did, which was Burbank School back in 2000, just a few weeks after we turned the radio on. And we've been able to, there were 14 students who were involved in that. We've been able to get a hold of 3 students so far. And it's real interesting because those 3 students, one of them got their PhD in physics and now works at Oak Ridge National Labs. Another one is a a certified public accountant. And then another one is a doctor of audiology. So, and he's got a practice in the Chicago area. So it's interesting. Those are the first three we've been able to get a hold of, and they're all, STEM careers. So it's pretty cool to hear 20 years later where these folks are. And I think everyone that's involved in this program knows it's very hard to find out, about these students because of the Privacy Acts. But we have some energetic individuals, volunteers in our team, and they were able to find it. So I just wanted to leave that, that's just the tip of the iceberg, I think. So we're going to continue digging over the next few weeks and months, and we'll provide some more data.
Speaking of data, I also want to just acknowledge it is very rare for an educational study to have data covering 20 years with the kind of depth that we have. As you say, we don't have individual students, but we certainly have numbers. All of the programs have maintained these numbers. We worked out some standardized ways to count across programs, but to get this kind of data, it's actually a treasure trove of data for this kind of long-term longitudinal study.
And I absolutely thank ISS National Labs and Space Station Explorers for helping us along the way, challenging us. Dan, you continue to challenge us to grow. You, Samantha, and Diane have continued to do that, and we very much appreciate that.
Hi there, Liam. I don't know if you had a question, an additional question, but I'm unmuting you. So if you'd like to, it was a good time.
There we go. Hi there. Yeah, thanks for just a very expansive presentation on the impact of all of this education to students. I wanted to really, maybe a question, but also, yeah, just on the, I obviously saw the focus of the student impact was on primarily on experiments that students have engaged with on the space station. But there was an area of student impact that you called the adjunct student impact. So those are students engaged in education related to the space station, but not directly related to an experiment on the station.
Actually, if I could, Liam, just let me correct that. We really have a third circle that is much bigger that's around that. That is, we probably reached about 10 million kids overall with any kind of outreach or learning activity. The adjunct are people who are directly connected with one of the on-orbit experiments. Okay. They might be a competitor in the SSEP program or in Zero Robotics or in Genes in Space who didn't actually win the competition, but put in extensive work on a serious plan or a test coding or whatever it is for the actual experiment.
Right, yeah, so got it. And you probably sort of anticipating where I was going on this, there's aspects of like ARIS and ISS above where what's going on are students being, in some cases, quite significantly involved in classroom education that's specifically related to the space station. So obviously that's where on mine I've got estimates of around 263,000 students being impacted through that kind of reach. And I think what you just described, yes, it's beyond the circle that you represented with the adjunct side of things. But if you're looking for numbers, that's just one area that obviously I've been directly playing with and very much supported through everything that the ISS National Lab has done to help that, including obviously the the grant that you provided in 2018 to get some of those ISS aboves out into 100 middle schools. So anyway, that was really where I was going from, just trying to get the scope of that student impact. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, and it's, it's a tricky question. I mean, it's incredibly gray, this sort of concept. I mean, NASA essentially charged us, the chief scientist actually from NASA said, well, how many students are actually doing experiments? And that question begs a whole bunch of other questions. We had to make a certain sort of kind of a litmus test that it was in some way directly doing an experiment that connected with the space station in some real way, either in the ground or the launching experiment or remote control. But it way underrepresents the full scope. And ISS above, I mean, you and I had a discussion about this, a couple of discussions about how do we categorize the fact that a student says, all right, it's going to fly overhead, and they get out there and then they watch as it flies overhead, and they're able to, it's like a personal experiment. And then they are watching all the new images come down, and they're exploring Earth. That leads to a whole bunch of other activities, and they're learning about radios. And so it really is, it becomes an impossible task. And I think in many ways, really, it's a whole other study to do the full scope of educational experiences. But this was, by definition, a constrained package.
Thanks.
All right, it looks like Alicia Santiago had a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Alicia, if you'd like to ask your question. Unless she stepped away. There you are. Hi.
Yes, this is really impressive, and the data is fantastic. I was really, I mean, I have to be honest, I had no idea of the reach of these and how many students have been impacted in such a positive way. I was just curious, Dan mentioned that about 45% of students are minorities. So I was just wondering if there's any data regarding the type of minority groups that have been reached, and also in terms of communities, are there kids from rural, urban, suburban communities? Is there any data on that? Just curious.
Yeah, and is this Alicia Carroll from Chabot?
Oh no, Alicia Santiago with Rita Carl, Twin Cities Public.
Oh, okay, yeah. Right. So let's first of all give incredible credit to Sci Girls for all that you and Rita and the rest of your team do for especially promoting girls, but also girls of color. That you had a huge reach and impact, including, for example, picking some of the students who've done these experiments and broadcasting them and highlighting them. We do not have data in terms of rural versus urban, and we don't have data differentiating specific minority groups, but we do get data reported in each of the quarterly reports that includes not just minority but also low socioeconomic, and the two are not necessarily overlapping, but we do make consistent efforts to reach especially underrepresented students. I'll mention a few programs. One is the Boys and Girls Club, the National Network of Boys and Girls Clubs, as well as special efforts in areas like Florida where we put some concerted effort. They do incredible work with helping kids after school. With their parents are working, they don't get a chance to do some other things, so we've been able to reach the audience that way. Also say that programs like the Quest Institute has highlighted underperforming students, students who, for example, one of their programs, much of their testing was done in special programs for students who had flunked several courses. I think one of the requirements to participate in this activity was that you had to have flunked at least one science course. And you think that's a strange requirement, but these kids said, "You mean me? I get to do this?" they shift from doing something in textbooks to doing a real hands-on experiment in space. They get all excited about it. And last year's award-winning student at the ISS R&D conference, Hispanic girl in one of those programs, we were so impressed that she was featured as an award winner. So I don't know if that answers your question, Alicia.
Beautiful. That's really nice to hear that. Yeah, all these students are being reached, so it's wonderful. Thank you, Dan.
I have to say, I think that's it for now. I don't know if there's some more coming in or questions are formulating. Feel free to grab my attention. And Narita, I have your hand up, but it might have just been a comment from earlier. I'm not sure. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you just in case if you'd like to say anything. And she's self-muted. You know, I had a quick question. It was just, oh, hi, there you go, Rita, go ahead.
Discovered the unmute button. Thank you. And hola, Dr. Santiago. I just wanted to follow up with Liam and Alicia's comments around kind of the characteristics of your larger ecosystem. That's one of the reasons why I wanted that PowerPoint. I just emailed you, Dan, because the circles and how you envision the depth, also your chart of, depth and length of interactivity is really interesting. So kudos on that. But kind of that larger ecosystem, and figuring out how to represent, say, the intersection of all of these programs together. One of the things that ISSNL has been able to do for our work is we've been able to leverage our Side Girls in Space work with NASA to now do a whole season of, and that is amazing, and new videos of girls doing experiments who have done flown experiments into space, and our work with Story Time from Space, and kind of just thinking about how our projects can be more intentionally connected. Frank sits on our board, and so we're looking at ARIS opportunities, we're looking at the MIT opportunities, we're looking at Liam's amazing tool, and how I'm just trying to think of ways that we can more intentionally help you as Twin Cities Public Television to be, a media representative of this larger ecosystem that will then can be part of the larger ecosystem because of our broad reach. So just wanted to chime in there. Thanks.
Yeah, Rita, that's a really, really good point. I mean, the reach you bring to this is huge, but importantly, it's also your partnership skills. And we'll say Storytime from Space is one of your partners, is a perfect example of that, to combine the kind of work that Patricia and her team have done around the astronauts reading books from space and the role models, and then what you're doing, in science in space of doing experiments. Is a good example of that. In a moment, we're going to hear about Expedition Space Lab, which is another example of collaboration across projects. I'll also mention during this COVID era, you all have done huge work with making learning opportunities available for use at home or online. We have our home out of school learning, the home learning initiative, which has many of you contributed things to and created things. We also, I'm sure, will find more opportunities. So another example is Liam and ISS Above and ARIS often are done at the same site. But the more we can do together, your point is very well taken, Rita.
Thanks, Dan.
I was about to say there's a couple people that were going to add a few comments. I don't know about Ted and Emily, whoever hops on first. I think I've got you both unmuted.
Hey there, Ted here. Hey, everybody. Great to hear some voices and see a few faces. Be nice to get in person again real soon. To just add to what Rita is suggesting here, I think there's a tremendous value of collaboration. And for those of you that have worked with Magnitude and our team, at the various fairs that we've done together. Clearly, the pandemic has kind of crimped that a little bit, but we're looking for those collaborations well into 2021. I think Dan's going to be sharing a little bit about a concept with the World Design Organization tomorrow called Orbital University, and that's just a really open-ended conversation that we can have. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from everyone what we can do to take this K through 12 engagement and extend it to university, undergrad, grad, postgrad. Clearly, manufacturing, industry, research, they're all looking for talent, and some of the amazing work that's being done at SSEP, Genes in Space, and others really speaks to me in terms of inspiring us to continue to grow our young program. I just wanted to say that.
Hey, there you are, Ted. Good to see you. Excellent. Yeah, and Emily, I don't know if you're on. I've unmuted you. She is.
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can, and you're welcome to share your camera too. I think you have the capabilities.
I am in the dark in my house. I didn't pick good lighting because I didn't think I was going to be showing my face. I'm sorry. I just was going to jump on to Dan's response about kind of what was included in the report and what wasn't, because it's a really impactful report, as I'm sure you can all see. And I think Dan did a good job highlighting too that we know there are many more partners and activities that inspire and reach so many of our students and that really help improve STEM literacy and motivate students to join the STEM workforce. But I also wanted to additionally point out that certainly in no way do we see the programming that's outside of what was counted in the report as in any way passive. We understand absolutely that it's active, hands-on, impactful STEM engagement and learning. And so, the boundaries that were put on the report, again, were just, kind of what Dan said about answering a very specific NASA question. I think they're as good a boundaries as any, right? I mean, we know that there's certainly STEM learning that's going on, even beyond what's going on with our SSE consortium in the national lab. But I just wanted to explicitly make that point that in much of our reporting that we do formally outside of this one specific document, we still include all of the incredible achievements of the other partner programs. And again, we very much appreciate that it's active learning and really impactful in this, mission to improve STEM literacy in our youth.
And I also just want to acknowledge, for those who don't know Emily Tomlin, she's with the Marcom group at CASIS and has done really a phenomenal job helping to get the word out about the various programs, overall responsibility for our outreach communications side of CASIS, and in particular helping out with the final steps of this report. So thank you for that, Emily.
Thanks, Dan.
Just making sure I didn't miss anybody else or other questions. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan. I think Justin's going to put our slides back up, and just so you can kind of get another little brief glimpse of the rest of the agenda and what's going to happen for the rest of the day. We're going to talk to you a little bit about, I would like to call it a new old program that we have. And so I actually want to introduce you guys to someone real quick as we get started, and you can go to the next slide. And her name is Courtney Black. And say, Dan, I don't know if you would like to introduce Courtney. If you'd like me to, we can definitely both do that. There's Courtney. Hi, Courtney.
Why don't you go ahead, Sam? I assume you're going to say about her position.
Yeah, definitely. For those of you who don't know Courtney, she has been an ambassador with us for many years, probably, trying to remember how long. But she actually came and worked with us a little this summer, working on this project, Expedition Space Lab. And when I say it's a new old program, it's because it was formerly known as the JFK Space School Lab. And it actually even started before that. We had an ambassador who really came with this great, amazing plan to have a space school lab, Leah Lacrosse. And she received some grant funding, but she needed a little bit more to make her lab complete. And we were able to support her in that. And so we're like, this is just an amazing program. We need to use it to amplify our programs. But we have some good news for Courtney. Not only did we get her for the summer, but you can see she is taking a nice break from her classroom right now. But Courtney is actually our newest education project manager. So she'll be joining our team here in the next couple of months, hopefully sooner rather than later. But Courtney, I'll let you introduce yourself so they can get to know you a little bit more.
Hi guys, thank you so much for having me today, and please excuse my hair. Generally speaking, I'm running around from classroom to classroom teaching science, and although I'll miss it desperately, I'm really excited about this new adventure and opportunity. As Sam had mentioned, this summer I had the privilege of working with some of the finest STEM education professionals in the country, and had a lot of fun kind of spinning wheels and figuring out, what is this? What was it? What do we want it to be in the future? And my input was really, how can teachers easily implement this into their schools, into their classrooms? How can informal educators create something that is unique and focuses on the intricacies of space education? So with that being said, I kind of went through and looked at some of the old programs too that we talk about, Moonshot and JFK Space School Lab. We kind of also went even further back and looked at Cases Academy and looked at some of these really rich and robust resources that aren't outdated quite yet, or just require a little bit of dusting off to kind of really look at our partner programs and display them to the best of their abilities and help teachers understand how they can incorporate that easily and efficiently into their classes. And that's where I come in.
You can see why we're so excited to have Courtney on our team. We're going to do some amazing things. And I know a lot of you got to meet her and talk with her a little bit this summer. So you'll just get to hear more and more from her. But Justin, you guys go to the next slide. I've got several here, and I want to kind of go through them quickly. Courtney and I are just going to kind of go back and forth. She worked on this a lot, and this was just some of the things that we worked on going through the Expedition Space Lab. And you'll hear it, we will slip and call it Space School Lab and some other things. But we did get rid of the word school for a reason, because we wanted to make sure we focused in on formal and informal groups. And sometimes that word school is a little bit of a deterrent for after school or informal programs. So Expedition Space Lab kind of fit the point. So we've got just a few little things we're going to go over so that you guys understand what Expedition Space Lab is and how it's going to work with your programs. And then there's some new people that we would love to hear from, how your programs can go work into it, as well as some of the ones that maybe we haven't aligned yet. You'll see through the timeline that the drafts and everything are changing. We're trying to get everything rolling in a nice manageable time frame, but yes, there's still lots that we can add and put together. So we can go to the next slide. And again, Courtney did a great job explaining a little bit about the organization, right? And like the JFK kind of took that, and we've developed a huge amount of ambassadors through this program. We got some great sponsored funding with Raytheon and Google and TD Bank. But the next one that we're going to be hosting ourselves will be a grant to a classroom or an organization that will submit for a grant, and we raised a little over $10,000 through our Virtual Strides campaign that we did a little while ago, and those are the funds that we're going to use to grant to these educators that are going to apply for this. So you can kind of go to the next grant or the next slide. And then Courtney, you want me to let you guys take over a little bit of the overview? Go for it.
Sure. Yeah, the overview of this, when we thought about what is the program, and Sam was really good about saying, not only are, in general, space resources underutilized, but when we talk about our partner programs that offer so much robust, real science that's happening in space, we wanted it to be more accessible. And I think that is kind of the key word we kept coming back to, was accessible. This needs to be accessible, not just to educators, whether it be formal or informal, but also students. So the purpose is to empower and equip teachers to utilize a multitude of resources available as a result of the science and research that occurs on the space station. So to the extent that these available resources, both free and expense related, are underutilized, we wanted to work with the Space Lab to see how can we encourage teachers to implement it. And we know that there's going to be different price points. As we discussed, we're working on a grant for one lucky organization, and maybe in the future multiple organizations, depending on funding and fundraising, to have something but it needs to be customizable. And that was something that we were adamant about, because some people will definitely want to utilize ExoLab. Maybe they already have an ExoLab and they want to add a few more, or gain equipment that's going to support that project. And that really is what we kept thinking of. How can we best empower those teachers to have a space lab, much like you would have a chemistry lab or a biology lab in an organization? Why not have a space lab? This is a growing area of science, and this should be celebrated and promoted. So what we really felt like was important as well was that it was, number one, easy to implement, but standards aligned, because so many teachers, we talk about accountability in education and how, you know, are you teaching the standards? Are you teaching the standards? And this provides a really engaging and empowering and really career connected way in order to teach the standards. When we talk about separating mixtures in 5th grade, I love talking about that ECLES system and how, you know, they're separating a mixture of urine in order to make it into usable water again. So we felt like that there are ways that we can do this fairly easily so that teachers don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, and I mean, even the standards are getting so important, because even after school program, 21st century program, they're having to show state and federal funding that they are aligning back to the standards and what's being taught in the classroom. So it's really important that we highlight the high level of these programs. And I mean, Diane can speak to this too, especially when we go to conferences and things. Your programs look so amazing that people feel like they're unattainable, they're unaffordable, you know, and so this is a way to showcase them in a more attainable way, right? To say, oh, okay, well, this is my budget, these are the things I can handle, or these are opportunities that are available to me, or, oh, wow, I didn't know there were all these great free programs for me to get involved in. So I think that's really important, that this packaging of it, and Emily and her team are going to be working on this to making sure that we make sure all of that is conveyed well. And so, I mean, we're lucky that we have an amazing marketing and communications team. They're going to make sure that we all look amazing coming across this, and it's a great way to package it that way. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Yeah, and we spoke a little bit about this, that we're working on the formal and the informal, and that we decided that a web-based approach was going to be a little bit easier probably for teachers to get access to, especially now in 2020. We've all learned that web-based is probably our best bet to go. But Courtney has done some really great things, and I want to give her a minute to talk about how she's empowered the ambassador program, as well as just some great classroom management things that we're going to add to this that are going to really inspire teachers. You know, kids love having that certificate to print out, or teachers love having logs and things like that. But again, Courtney, I'm going to let you talk about that. Uh-oh, she's still muted, but that's okay.
It started lagging a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Might be my internet. Okay. Oh, am I still muted?
No, you're good
now. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. Yeah, there seemed to be a little bit of a lag. I apologize. Some of the tools that we felt like were important for teachers to have is like a crew logbook. In science, we keep a notebook for everything. Everything we do goes in there. And we wanted to create kind of a fun, easy template where they can perhaps assign different roles and responsibilities, much like they would on the space station. Empowering students to kind of own their own education was an important element of our design for this program. And it's still a design and work. So if you are listening and you think, well, wait a second, I have some resources and activities that I have as part of my at my partner program, you know, I think it would be a great fit. Please let us know. Please, you know, reach out to us so that we can not only best serve the teachers, but also pair up these partner programs with more classrooms. The more classrooms, the wider the reach, the more impact we can have on students and eventually STEM education. So we really want this to be, I know that Dan talked about collaboration. We really want this to be a collaboration between various classrooms, the ambassadors, and our partner programs, because it's going to take, all of these different moving parts to make this work. We had mission critical categories, and these mission critical categories were an easy way to align to different areas of scientific study with those NGSS standards, life science and earth science. We felt like that was.
You're going right with the next slide. I'm like, go ahead, next slide.
Oh, I am. Oh, okay. Mission critical categories. Keep on. So, oh, good, because I didn't remember what we had called everything. And living in space, that life science category. How are we going to live in space? And that lends naturally to some of our programs like TomatoSphere and ExoLab. How are we going to grow our food? How physically are we going to survive? What are we going to need to do to prepare for living on the moon or maybe eventually Mars? Physics in space. And the one thing we love to use is some of those demonstrations from NASA, because they just are so dynamic and they put a real fun spin on some of these difficult physics concepts that we try to teach. Technology in space is evolving at a head spinning rate, and it's fascinating and something that really engages the mind and imaginations of students. And then Earth and space science, especially from space, the Windows on Earth and Sally Ride Earth Cam and all of these programs that I think a lot of educators are hesitant to implement because they don't feel like they're as easy as they really are. So we want to do little perhaps activities and lessons that really complement and show off how easy it is to do TomatoSphere, how easy it is to do Sally Ride Earth Cam, and all of these programs that people have worked so hard on. We want to really promote those.
No, that's excellent. And I know I've actually already, Courtney, got feedback on our space cadet. They're like, somebody might think that's considered negative to be a space cadet.
Yeah.
So I was like,
yeah.
Because this is our draft version. You can go ahead and go to the next slide too, Justin, that, we've got just templates that we're working on. And Courtney has, put them together, and it's like, well, where does your program fit? Are you, in this science, do you run across all of them? Do you run across all grade levels? We're looking at both. And, we're going to definitely, when we get some stronger draft versions of this available, to share that with you. But again, Courtney has put together an amazing advisory panel of ambassadors. Many of you have, exactly who they are because she's probably talked to you this summer. And the ambassadors have talked to you, but that's your go-to person, right? That's going to communicate with you what's happening, how you're getting represented in this, and they're doing some additional things. And I'll let Courtney explain what we've got the panel working on.
Yes. And the space cadets, I want to reclaim that word. I think you're right. There's a negative connotation there that I think definitely not earned, because the cadet program for the space candidates, I feel like they're pretty smart. I know I probably couldn't hold my own for 2 minutes, but I think that you're right. There's a negative connotation, and that's something that we should, look at and address. And maybe we will reclaim it and put a positive spin back on it, or change it. But as Sam said, these are all drafts, and it's definitely a living document. It's a living program that's going to evolve and change. But one thing that I did notice is that so many of these programs, perhaps I'm a biology teacher in high school, so many of these programs can apply to multiple different areas, not just biology, but there are several. So we wanted to create something that is customizable based on maybe area of practice or study. We wanted to create something that was customizable based on grade level. There's a lot of material for high school, and then there's a lot of material for middle school, and then a lot of elementary schools. Let me just tell you, my 3rd grade team I just met with the other day, because they said, we just don't know how to incorporate science. And that breaks my heart. But there's fun and engaging ways that they can incorporate into different areas, be it reading or social studies, especially with those programs like Storytime and and Sally Ride, that they can start working on writing. Look at this picture. What do you see? Explain it in detail in writing. So that was why we felt like it was kind of necessary to take the diamond and start cutting those facets, like one in different areas. However someone is approaching space education, that they can make it work for them.
And we can go ahead and go to the next slide, because I just want to speak real quickly on kind of the funding, right? It's great that this one amazing organization or school is going to get this grant, right? I don't know about you guys, but when I was a classroom teacher, I would see a grant, it looked really interesting, and maybe I didn't know enough about that program. And a lot of times this is going to be something that we put forth at, you know, the National Science Teacher Association conference, all these amazing conferences, and people are going to go, well, I have to dig in and start looking at all these programs and how I'm going to implement them to apply for this grant. So it's definitely bringing awareness to all the different programs that are available, as well as, you know, if you're a program and you know, I have to go for the free ones, right? This isn't going to be attainable for me. And then this gives them the opportunity to dig into ones to see if it's worth the investment. But another component of this that we thought was really exciting was the fact that we're going to put in a letter template in this packaging, so that, you know, with JFK schools, you had funders like Raytheon, Google, a local TD bank, so that a school or organization can take that letter to their local TD bank, right, or their local bank in general, and say, hi, I'm really wanting to do this space school lab, right, or I'm wanting to do this space lab in my group, my organization. How can you contribute? Can you help? Maybe they wouldn't contribute the full 10, but they said, oh, you know what, we'll sponsor that ISS above, we'll sponsor that EXO lab, we'll sponsor part of this in your plan, and we'll have our name on it. We'll be a part of, you know, funding STEM education in our local communities. So this will be a great way to empower people to go out and seek those funding themselves. And so hopefully it will just kind of work in our benefit that way, and that's our hope, as well as some of the bigger organizations that we've been reaching out to. I'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit, but we are reaching out to some different groups who have connections with large sponsors, and they're like, wouldn't they love to sponsor a grant for a space school lab? So let me go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so kind of going over it. Obviously, this is going to be housed on the website. You'll still see the program templates like they are currently, where you'll see all the different programs, and teachers can go and search those. But now they're going to be like, oh, let me see if I can make a space school lab. And so it'll be a web-based program that they can all go in and see. We are hoping, obviously, to put this out at NSTA next year, next April. Of course, that is COVID pending. We don't know exactly what that conference is going to look like. I'd love to get some input. If you think it'd be better to go ahead and do that larger conference virtually, because we think all the teachers are going to end up doing that anyway, or maybe hold up to a bigger in-person event. So we're just going to kind of get some feedback on that and see what works out best. But looking again, another STEM conference. Go to the next slide. And again, I already talked a little bit about the funding and how we're looking to build on the success from this event, right? And so if this is a really successful program, we're going to continue building, and we feel like a lot of different funding programs or organizations will see that this is a great way I can contribute to my community, locally supporting that grant. Yep, we did receive, I was trying to remember the number, it was 14,000 from Virtual Strides. So we were even thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a larger grant for the first place person and then a smaller portional grant for another one. But again, that's going to be part of the template that the grant they would have to fill out would be as a sample inventory, right, of what they're going to be requesting. All right, we can go to the next slide. And Courtney, I'm going to go ahead and let you go ahead because it looks like you're ready to jump in.
Yeah, I'm ready. And I realize you said to kind of expound a little bit on that advisory panel. Like Sam said, many of you know them because you probably work with them. So if I say names like Michael Wilkinson and Melissa Poore, these are all educators that are so well versed in your programs that we intentionally selected them because we know if an activity or lesson comes across our desk, I may not be the expert educator in that field or for that particular program, but I know that I can reach out to Michael or Melissa and say, can you take a look at this and see if this properly kind of whets the appetite in order maybe to encourage an educator to apply for an ARIS contact or can you take a look at this? And this panel of educators, if you have any doubt, please contact me, because they are pretty amazing. And I can't believe that I get the privilege to work with each of them. And they were essential to this timeline because they're currently working on reading some of these lessons and activities. And some of them are ones, if you have lessons, maybe I know that some of these educators created lessons for you and for your programs, then, make sure to, reach out to us, because we would love to promote those as part of School Space Lab. And this was integral to the timeline. They've been working over the summer of collecting things that they already had, or maybe they were NASA lessons or activities that felt like that really demonstrated the benefits of using the different partner programs. And they were working on it this summer. The timeline is kind of tiny. I apologize. So the collection of materials for presentation was October 30th. And over the next few months, we're going to be honing these materials. We're going to be looking at the partner programs. We're going to be looking at the alignment of different standards and how participating in each of these programs will help facilitate the instruction of these standards. The content desk is then going to revise these. We have a template that the educators are using, so everything looks uniform. And they'll be launched onto the website after we do the kickoff, like we said, hopefully in STA in April, and where we can advertise for this and then announce the recipient of that very first Space Lab, and hopefully encourage the participation of teachers across the country to do their own Space Lab on whatever scale it is that perhaps they may already have a funder and they say, we have $20,000. We wanted to do something new and different, and we can assist them in customizing their own Space Lab in their educational facility. So we're hoping by June of 2021 to have everything announced and kicked off, and hopefully COVID will be just a distant memory by that point. Unfortunately, probably not, but one can hope.
Nice. And Liam, you're already unmuted. So if ever station is flying over and you want to tell us station is flying over, you are more than welcome to. I'm sorry, I had a second to look at the questions. So yes, I think we missed it. At least if you're in California, we've missed it.
No, it's still going over the USA.
There we go. So it's there, everyone, so you know. I would say, I thought I gave Liam the okay to anytime interrupt when station's heading over us. Lauren, you had a really great question, and I want to make sure we addressed it. A large grant as opposed to small little grants, right? For us, hoping that, let's say we have a large sponsor come forward, maybe like a Google, since we've had them before, or Raytheon, and they say, I'm going to contribute $40,000 to this program. Before, JFK kind of made the rules on that, and they said, well, we're going to do $10,000 grants, and we're going to do 4 of them for that, or 5,000, depending on what it was. And so we've decided that we're going to do the 10. Now, I think probably some of that smaller amount of the 14 that we raised with Virtual Strides is going to be needed to make the program happen. So we might need to use some of those funds. But let's say we did receive funding from another organization or source, and it wasn't that lovely rounded $10,000 amount. I can see us giving smaller grants. But Lauren, I'm going to unmute you just in case I didn't answer that correctly and you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, because I know before, we got some folks who were utilizing some of our products with the grant, which was very exciting. But it seemed like a lot of schools across the country that were getting, small bits of money to get that funding. And since we have a new product, the Space Farmer Dream Kit, I've already had people asking me, is there grant funding for this available? And I was eagerly awaiting more information on this to see if it would be something they'd be able to utilize. So that's where my question comes from.
Yeah. Well, I think for most part, we're going to stick big. And not that it won't change. That's a very good possibility that this might morph into something different or have a unique twist. But as of right now, we're focusing it on more of the one large prize, right? The one more large grant. And that's going to drive the traffic, the everything that we're looking forward to the programs, right? And giving them those tools and getting teachers used to looking at their classroom like a space school lab, right? Like Courtney was saying, this elementary school teachers are scared. And like, how can I make this happen, especially in this format? And so actually, I'm going to go ahead and let that lead into our next discussion, but I wanted to stop and just pause to see if anybody else had any questions before we moved on to talk a little bit more about ambassadors. I have to say, if you were unmuted before, I just left you unmuted. I probably should have just unmuted everyone. Oh, Barbara, I'm going to go ahead and Barbara. I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wrote it in the question thing. I know in our area particularly, and I think there's a lot of school districts across the country that have educational foundations. And these educational foundations will oftentimes run with lots of money available for items like this. And I wondered if you guys would give any consideration to putting a letter together that school districts can take to the foundation or teachers can take to the foundation, or maybe even a template, 3 or 4 slide presentation that allows an easy path for those teachers or teachers or school districts to take a presentation to their education foundation and ask for the money.
No, that's great. I like the presentation idea. We definitely have the form letter idea plan, but I'll write down the idea of a presentation. I think that's fantastic. I remember when I was a classroom teacher, give a presentation to our local PTA, even because they would fund, but you had to come to the PTA meeting, give a presentation, and then they voted to see if you were funded. But no, I think that's great. We're going to talk more tomorrow about Space Grant and some other possibilities for funding, not just things like this, but for your programs too. So I think this will be a good transition into that. But yeah, I definitely like the fact that we can empower them with just even a few lists of organizations they can start, because it's like, well, who do I go ask first, right, for this money? And maybe a list of organizations or options for them to get involved.
Yeah, and I think just, some of what you guys were showing, how you're already tying it to standards, some of the things that the teacher, you take the load off of the teacher to have to research all that, and they can utilize the information that we're already preparing and take it to an education foundation or a PTA and say, if you guys will fund this, investment, this space lab, these are the items that I can get, and here's how they directly tie into the, national standards.
No, that's excellent. And for those, I always forget that, we have some new people here. So that is Barbara Lewis. She is with NASA. She's over at Johnson. So next time you guys talk, let everybody know, for those new folks, who you are and what organization you're with. And I know before that was Lauren Milford who spoke, who is with Dream Up. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that in my to-dos and housekeeping next time, just to make sure you mention who you are and who you're with. But that's helpful. All right. Did we have
I think Barbara brings up a really great point. It's that there's not a lack of desire among educators to teach science or space education, but there is a lack of know-how and there's a lack of time. And the more we can do to kind of make it easy for them to implement and to fit in their constraints, whether it's budgetary constraints or if it's standards-based constraints, the more we can do to say, well, don't worry about it. It's already done for you. And here's this presentation to take to your educational foundation, perhaps to get some Space Farmer dream kits. Then I think the more successful, I think the entire, not just the Expedition Space Lab, but also our individual programs will be. So that's a great idea.
Can I add something? This is Liam, ISS Above. Yeah, so I've seen teachers get funding for ISS Aboves through Donors Choose. Me just being, some little supplier, I don't quite fit into the model that Donors Choose has for a recognized partnership, but teachers who've got a certain level number of points or something, they can do a special project within Donors Choose to get the ISS Above funded. And I've now just seen that Magnitude had had their program, which included an ISS Above. Thank you very much, Ted and Tony, for another educator called Javier Montiel, I think. Yeah. So Courtney, you know, yeah. So the reason I'm bringing this up is there's a way that that works. I think there's a way that works with Donors Choose when they're dealing with folks like me. But I'm curious if it might be, there's two ways that this could be done. Firstly, with your letter that you're creating to help teachers and others go for funding. I can see a situation where this could be a standard package that Donors Choose might formally represent in the Donors Choose program. And I believe that I know I've got a bunch of ISS Above schools who have teachers. One in particular, I've got to remember her name. Wasn't you, Courtney, was it? So, someone who had a very, they had a sort of advisory capacity with Donors Choose. So they were, I'll dig back through my emails, but that I'm just putting that forward as a potential way to empower, you know, every teacher to go to Donors Choose, for instance, as another way to get access to these resources. Anyhow, I'll leave that out there.
No,
Thanks.
that's great. No, thank you, Liam. That was really good input. And I know there's been some, is it Donors Choose, where someone came on and paid like half of everything they were asking for sometimes. Some
Yeah.
very philanthropic. But
yeah, I think that even happened with the most recent one with Javier's thing with Exolab. I think the total price was around $1,800, and there were portions of that were picked up by foundational type donations. It wasn't just individual donations. So I don't know. We'll have to hear from Ted and Tony if there's some additional detail there as where the funding came from. But I noticed his project, it just had 4 donors, and a couple of those, I believe, were you know, were at a foundational level. They were just one was 3M, for instance. Right. 3M put some funds into it. Anyhow, have I got that right, Ted?
That's correct.
Yeah, and I unmuted Tony too, so if Tony needed to add in, you're more than welcome to. No, that's excellent.
Anyway, I'll just amazing work. I'm so happy to see you on board, Courtney. I mean, you're such a powerhouse out there, you know, on the, you know, right at the front lines of teaching at schools. So I was so happy to see when you got picked to come on board with all of this. So
I'm so excited. Thank you.
Awesome, powerful team on there on the ISS National Lab education side. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm gonna go ahead and let Justin go to the next slide, as I want to give us plenty of time at the end just to kind of have some discussion.
Sam, can I jump in with one? Sorry, I raised my hand, but I know you're like double dutying now because you're talking and manning the questions. But I was just going to say, sorry, this is Emily again. I'm with CASIS. I'm with the communications team, and this conversation has been super helpful for me because I really was expecting just to listen in today, but I've been hearing such great, fantastic things, and we know that this Space Lab concept can be a really powerful vehicle for local sponsorship because we've seen that with how it worked with JFK Space Lab. And it's really interesting to hear about all these other ways we might be able to go about helping folks to procure these. And I think maybe as we build it out on the web, we ought to think about a dedicated section that's devoted just to that. So this has been really exciting to hear and really helpful from kind of the communications perspective.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you, Emily.
And sorry you could hear my dog again. I didn't expect to talk today, sorry.
Okay, I'm surprised I haven't gotten an Amazon delivery yet. It's impressive that it's been quiet this long. But I know I just wanted to take a quick minute to, you know, talk about the Ambassador Network and how it's grown and changed since even just the last time we talked. I like to put the little picture of Casey and Leah. Leah was the one who actually was the one who was the recipient of the space school grant the first time. And Casey, there were the original two before I even came on. And now we have over 1,200. And I wanted to even pull some of the metrics out to look at, you know, how many, because we do send out the metric report and ask ambassadors, you know, have you been doing outreach? What kind of activities have you been involved in? And we hear some amazing stories about what, you know, the ambassadors are doing with your programs as well as NASA programs, and just amazing things. And so just looking at just a little snapshot was like, you know, over 570,000 people just through events, you know, in the last couple of years. So I'm really excited about that number, and I hope you guys have seen the benefits of that and that network growing and more visibility for your programs through the ambassador program. But you know, I've just looking at some of the pictures, we've even highlighted Lori Orr, and I wanted to mention, I think I might have unmuted Jancy. I don't know if she's still on or not. One of our ambassadors who worked in the area of music, and how she's taken it and shared space station through music. I think we even have a couple ambassadors that are part of a band, space band. So if you're ever looking for performances, we can probably help you out with even the ambassador program and how the arts have taken part of that. But just everything from conferences to giving outreach to you name it, the ambassadors have done an amazing job. And now we have this advisory panel, thanks to Courtney, of ambassadors who are going to, you know, carry the torch for your programs out there. If you're not already ambassador yourself, I highly recommend you jump on the ambassador dashboard. Courtney did a great job this summer keeping up with everybody's questions that came in. And so, you know, again, like if you hear somebody, like there's Melissa Poor up there on the right. If somebody had an ARIS question and I know Frank's busy, or if it's just a teacher related question, I could send them to Melissa or a few other ambassadors that I know are really, really well versed in that program. And it was really easy to make connections with people and to just spread the word. And so you hear the enthusiasm of the teachers' voices and how they are loving these programs, and how it just kind of, they feed each other, you know, especially with burnout rates right now for educators, as well as with COVID and everything else going on. It's great to know you have this network of people who understand and are trying to fit the content in. But we can go ahead and go to the next slide real quick. Some things we're doing, trying to engage more with the ambassadors and giving them tools. And I want to thank Ted. So I hope Ted is on. Ted, you can even turn on your camera and talk about this a little bit more. He did this really great connection with us and for us with Bitmoji. And I just posted my classroom. I don't know if Ted's posted his, if you guys can see those. I'll send you guys a link to those directly if you don't have them. But these are really great ways that I found that teachers are engaging with their kids. I have a second grader at home, and she had one of these, and I was like, what is this? And it took me a while to figure it out, but it is an amazing tool and resource. And I highly recommend, if you need any support or help, I'm thinking about just doing a partner webinar to kind of show you guys how to set up your own to put out there for people to understand and learn about your program more. But as you can see, mine has a little bit of collection of everybody. There's even a green blob on the floor for slime in space, tomato sphere poster, you name it, NASA resources, any type of thing you can click on, and it takes them to your website, and they can learn a lot more about there. But Ted, you want to talk about yours and some of?
I'll just take a minute. The pandemic, a lot of interesting things happened, and as we got back to thinking about the start of school, what we realized at Magnitude was a lot of teachers were dismayed that they weren't setting up their classrooms for their students. And this emergent behavior happened. It started back in April and May. They started building these virtual classrooms. And there's a particular Facebook group, I think it's called Bitmoji, Excite for Educators or something, but there's over 540,000 teachers that have created Bitmoji. So I reached out to Snap and Bitmoji, got a hold of the founder, and connected them with the U.S. National Laboratory and with Sam. And within 6 weeks' time, they had prototypes. And last week, they launched 3 avatars that are in spacesuits, which is fantastic. And one of them I really love is floating with a book. So story time in space. I think Patricia's already, I sent her a link to that. She should get pretty excited. There are 3 new astronauts coming at the back end of the week. And if anyone has interest in extending this, I'm recommending that you run some kind of contest. And I'll work with Sam this week, but we're going to be announcing something with our group. Our lab that actually goes to the space station is going to have a Bitmoji of a teacher somewhere in our network that's going to get selected. We can't send them to space, but we're going to send their Bitmoji. So it's going to be pretty fun and exciting. If anyone's interested in this, please reach out to Sam. I really want this to be directed by the U.S. National Lab. We're building a pretty nice relationship with Bitmoji. This is, it's not just a K-6 teachers or just middle school teachers. I've seen high school teachers and even a university professor use this just to engage their group. And so I'm really thankful. If you are using Bitmoji, just search for space. You'll see it. They're really neutral. You don't see any logos on them or anything like that. And it's really just designed to create some excitement in the classroom. So look for some of those coming up. And if you want to do some kind of coordination, by all means, reach out to Sam and we'll figure out what we need to do. Hopefully we'll get a second phase of these running after the next release next week, but really excited to see those published.
Oh, I know. I was really excited. I got to update my little teacher in her little outfit to an astronaut suit. I'm like, that was pretty exciting stuff right there. And of course, Ted's got his where it looks like he's floating on station, which is amazing. I love it. But these are great ways, again, that we can give. If we have these, we can put them on the ambassador dashboard and engage even deeper with the ambassadors through your programs. And so, again, like I said, I'm happy to help put them together. I think I was talking with Patricia, I think she's on, Patricia Tribe with Storytime from Space, about having just a library set up where it looks like you're at a library and you actually pick the books, and when you click on it, the astronaut reads and it links back to her page. But I'm happy to share it. I actually learned about it myself through a YouTube how-to video to how to figure out how to set it up. So it was amazing. Another one of the partnerships I wanted to share with you guys, and I know many of you got connected directly with Discovery Education. And so Discovery Education is one of those new and exciting one that's going to house content. And it's another way for this really amazing large audience to get out there. And so anytime you have new content or maybe content we haven't asked you for to share yet, that would be great. They're looking for pictures, they're looking for videos, they're looking for that highly engaging media that is kind of what their platform is based on. And so those are kind of the things that we're looking for to help even build the ambassador program. But another thing that's wonderful about Discovery Education is they have some really great big name sponsors. And so we're hoping to build out the Expedition Space Lab through them and maybe get some sponsorships through that organization. And we're really excited about the future and what that program has. Now that we have, you know, our full staff coming around, we're looking forward to having more webinars. And so I know I've had a few with a few of you, but we need to definitely get everybody on board, especially if you are new to the consortium. What we do is usually host a webinar that talks a little bit about your program, and then that webinar is housed on the ambassador dashboard. So if you're thinking about doing an experiment in space, how would I do that? What does it look like? You can click on that link for that program and it kind of gives you a little bit of a how-to, or how do I use that program in my classroom, or if you're in elementary, middle, high school, how would that work? Also, we had an amazing downlink, and I was going to let Diane, if you wanted to share, we can let Diane share, that we hosted for the partners. And you guys did a great job submitting all those videos and did an amazing job. And Courtney has actually already submitted the next downlink request for the ambassadors. And so the ambassadors are going to get to ask some of those questions, and they're going to be ambassadors that are working with your programs. So it's another great way to amplify the work that you guys do, amplify the ambassador program and everything that everybody's working so hard for. I think that is my last slide. You want to go to the next one, Justin? Yes, questions. So I think we have, what have we got, almost 15 minutes left for just some Q&A back and forth. If you have a camera, I would love and highly recommend you turn it on so we can just see everybody and get involved. I'm going to unmute everyone, and so that if you wanted to talk or anything, you're more than welcome to. Some topics that maybe you didn't see on the agenda that you want to make sure we somehow address or cover in the next couple of days, now's a great time to do that as well. I see Liam's hand up again. I'm sorry, I've not been moderating the questions at the same time that I've been talking. So feel free to jump in. I'm going to go through and make sure everybody is unmuted So if you'd like to jump in and talk, just please announce yourself and your organization when you do.
I can jump in again, but I was seeing if someone else was going to jump in before me. Yeah, I can't figure out how to switch on my camera. I don't know whether that's you have to be a panelist or something to switch on video. But anyway, not to worry. My question, so it may be a suggestion / question. Obviously, with such an extensive ambassador, there you go. I will share my webcam now. Thank you for clicking the button that allowed us to do that. Hi, everyone. All right. So, yeah, it was what I've often encountered, and Courtney, I think you probably know as much about this as anyone, the community of educators who are already on board with this is unbelievable. And what you've created with the ambassador program as a way to collect and communicate with those people is really amazing. But I was wondering if there's any thoughts about providing a way for that community in particular to collect together and organically grow and share information, because at the moment, unless you've got something else going on, I see it as mostly as a sort of a one-way presentation of information from Space Station Explorers. Like there's lots of information on all of the education programs, and you can have the ambassadors check that out. You mentioned there was a dashboard, and maybe I've missed the context of that. But where I'm going with this is, I think oftentimes what happens is when teachers, it's sort of like what happens at the SEEK conference in February. You get teachers together, and the mere fact that they're together means that they bounce ideas off each other. So where I'm going is just, I know of a number of online community platforms that I think could be a good candidate for that kind of empowered community to sort of and what I think the result of that could be is a real expansion beyond what may be possible just with your own resources. Anyhow, so
No.
I don't know whether that landed anywhere, but there you go.
No, and that's great. When I was a classroom teacher, I was a solar system ambassador with NASA, and
me too.
In that program was amazing, right? I joined it many moons ago when they threw a lot of funding at it, and they would send you locations and lots of resources. And I know it's changed in a bit through the times, but yeah, that's definitely something that we're trying to do, is something similar where we can connect with other networks.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think that if I'm not speaking out of term, it's probably one of the things that's going to very excitedly land on my desk. And I'm excited to kind of expand it in that organic way, because, for a long time, it was kind of, we had that SEEK crew, and that's kind of that core, 50 educators. And then, the teacher liaison program with the Space Foundation has about 300, and we have a wider reach with our 1,200 members. And what I would love to do is to see, and kind of starting with that advisory panel, like focus in and have them feed into other teachers, teachers, and they have a network of 5 or 10 teachers that they kind of work with and collaborate with. And I would love to see, I don't know what online format you were thinking. I mean, ideally, we would love to be in person, and I would love to see that space conference that was at Kennedy kind of get revitalized. But with COVID and everything that happened, last year, it is quite uncertain. But what online platform do you think would work best for that kind of collaboration?
Yeah, so one of the ones I've really been engaged with a lot is actually a system called Mighty Networks. If you just go to, I think, mnmikenovember.com, it'll get you to the sort of a platform. And there's several really quite extensive communities that are, in some of my buckets of connections. And what I'm just seeing that provides for is a way to have the community share among themselves. The total feature set of that particular platform is about creating places where people can share online courses. And it's like a membership-based thing, but they have a free version and a not very expensive paid version in terms of the organization that creates it. So, and I know there's like a million ways an online community can be done. Obviously a lot of us live on social media platforms and we're connected with various, I would call them silos, but there's such a fluidity between the communities that I see across all of these. And I just see that there could be real value in having that kind of flow of information, not just from ambassadors to ISS National Lab and then ISS National Lab out to other ambassadors, but actually allow the ambassadors to have the ability to share, this is an event that I've got going on that others may be interested in, or here's some lessons I've created that other ambassadors may find that they're of interest use in their own classrooms. So, and I know it sort of takes the control a little bit of, outside of your wall, if you see what I mean. But it's sort of like teachers who come along to seek, every single one of them is the kind of educator you want out there doing everything they're doing. So anyway, don't know where that leaves us all, but we can obviously have further conversations about that if there's more that I want to do. In fact, two of the people that I invited on, I don't know if they're on here, Chiara and Lisa Marie, they came from one of those communities, from the Overview Collective, which is the group that is founded based around Frank White's overview effect. So he is the creator of that term, the author of 3 books that are all to do with what's going on behind me here, is what happens when astronauts get to see this. So Lisa Marie and Chiara, I don't know if you're still on, but they are space influencers, as what Samantha, you coined them. They are definitely space influencers across the world. So anyway, that's the power of that type of community platform.
Yeah, I saw Lisa Marie on here. I wasn't sure what the other person you mentioned. I don't know if Lisa, you'd like to say anything about that. You're more than welcome to jump in.
That would be awesome, Lisa Marie.
And that's okay.
Lisa Marie is based in Arizona. Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really enjoying this lecture. And I think, just one of the questions that come to mind, because I'm an art person, is where's the A in the STEM, for STEAM? And so when I think about the ISS, I think about how do we the different ways that we can translate the importance of what's going on up there. And part of it is engaging in the experiments, but I think there's another route, which is the power of art and how that can be useful because it transcends language. And I think that might be an avenue, well, at least an avenue that Chiara and I definitely want to explore, because I think there's a place for that. And it's a way to kind of include students that are not necessarily really good at STEM, but are so inspired by what they see happening.
Oh, definitely. Like what Dan talked about earlier, the Firehouse program where you had to have an F in one of the STEM fields, right? Or subject areas to even qualify for the program, to get those kids excited about those programs. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I don't know if Jancy is still on here, but Jancy is with SciArt Exchange, which is really at the center of that. It is all about art projects related to space and inspiring students.
And I am definitely here jumping up and down with enthusiasm. So yes, I 100% agree. And we're it's not actually just about engagement. That's the first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Excited. Oh, Did you have me muted, Samantha?
No, I switched you over to a panelist in case you wanted to show your camera. I just didn't realize there was going to be a lag.
Oh, I don't.
Like it muted you for
Oh,
a
there is a camera thing. Okay. I'm in my kitchen because who knows?
But it's showing
Hello?
the back webcam probably.
How about we just not do the camera then? That's the cat earwax medicine. Okay, like you really needed to know that. So yes, we are of course very interested in the power of weaving the arts in for the storytelling and engaging those who do not yet feel comfortable being a part of the future of space. Totally. But we are also exploring how that integration is actually going to really help with problem solving skills as well, so that they're going to help us solve those future challenges. So yeah, here. Thanks, Liam.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, so I've got to get you connected with Lisa Marie and Kiara.
Lisa Marie and I actually met, I believe.
There you go.
Yes, of course. So yeah, she's fabulous. It's a large but small world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. I have Emily, I know you raised your hand, and I think there was Rosalie, I don't know if you just raised your hand or I think that happened a while back.
I was just going to say thanks to Liam for bringing the stuff up about community building, because I think that that's something, Sam, we've talked about quite a bit. And I think that, all the great work you've done growing our ambassador network has been very grassroots and somewhat manual. And we've used in-house platforms. And certainly we know that community building and community engagement and community interaction involves both pushing and pulling. So I'm respectful of what you're saying about, especially with some of these Expedition Space Lab programs, the idea that we don't want it just to be us pushing. We need to be also soliciting feedback and empowering kind of just community spread. And I think that looking at platforms for that is definitely one way we'd like to go about that. I think we need to also be thinking about creative ways to be doing kind of story building in the community and to, excite people. And really looking forward to working with Sam and the team as we start to do some of that sort of marketing piece of all of this. But certainly ideas from this group on community engagement platforms that you think have worked well. We obviously have a fairly robust social media presence, but for something like this, there's so many new tools out there that just over the last couple of years have come out, and then obviously in the last 6 months have exploded and become so much more sophisticated. I think there's probably lots of online approaches and platforms we could be considering, and we are excited to get your feedback in those areas if you have ideas.
Thanks.
Am I unmuted, Samantha?
You are, yes.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that a famous person, Dan Barstow, had said that ARIS makes the power of combining ham radio and space exploration into a magical elixir to engage students. And so I had to get that in there. Thanks, Dan. A number of you have engaged with us. And sometimes ARIS has engagements where universities work with lower grades. I know one of your people talked about ways to engage universities. So that's a way to do it through us.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. And you're right. And Dan, you better come back on. I know he's popped on for a second. But no, we're going to actually have a deeper conversation about that tomorrow as well, which engaging those universities. So no, that was perfect.
And we should mention, I think, Liam, didn't you just get your ham license?
Yeah, I did. That's not why I came on, though.
Congratulations.
It was actually, it was back in October. But that was for an ARIS event that was run by a university-led education program into elementary schools. It was actually at the USC, University of Southern California in downtown LA, where they adopted all the schools around the campus. And they have their own program called the Young Scientist Program, where, and I see this being replicated in many other universities. Caltech, which is nearby me as well in Pasadena, they have an engaged community that goes out into the school community around the universities and directly works with those schools and brings them into all of the education that's related to what they're up to. And many universities, of course, are related to, they have experiments on the space station. Caltech has them, of course. USC has them, many other places. So I'm glad you brought that in as a potential avenue. It's already happening, and the USC way of doing that kind of university-led education and support into schools is really well documented. They've created some amazing results out of that program. Anyhow, I'll go back into the background.
No, that was wonderful, Liam.
I love your background, Liam. Flying over the Middle East and all over the world. It's cool.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Space Station.
Well, I'm trying to think. I think we might have gotten all of the questions, Dan, unless anybody else wants to jump in before we close up here at 3 o'clock.
Hey, Sam, this is Frank.
Hey, Frank.
Hey, I just want to give a shout out to Liam for winning the balloon race a few months ago. Ted's Magnitude IO team was involved, and Eris and a group in Oregon, and Liam got across the coast, and it sounds like he might go across the ocean.
Yeah, maybe eventually. Yeah, I was very lucky, but
it's worth just saying that. I don't know if Ted is on. Ted's been our balloonist par excellence. It's remarkable going around the world with these kinds of experiments. Ted, do you want to just say what that was?
Oh yeah, suborbital for sure. Yeah. Well, the idea here is students really want to find something in space. I think CubeSats have a lot of students' interest. We had a good fortune of working with the U.S. Department of Education earlier in the year with something that they call a CubeSat Challenge. But, put something in the atmosphere, fairly easy to do, relatively inexpensive. And, depending on the type of equipment, you don't even need to file an FAA notice. The race that we had with Liam and some other teachers was just a 1 meter Mylar balloon filled with like 2.5 cubic feet of helium. And the payload was all of 12 grams. I think I have one around here somewhere. I have to thank NASA engineer Bill Brown from Huntsville. He's been building and designing balloon payloads for 30 some odd years. And this is the
device. You want to switch your camera on, Ted?
Oh yeah, hold on one second. My camera's not on.
Yeah. And my balloon was funded by Ted, so just letting you know.
All right, there we go. So here's this little guy. That's it. It weighs all like 12 grams, solar powered, a super thin board here. You just need a ham radio license, and there's no age restriction. And so, Frank and the Eris crew there, I think would be more than happy to get some students involved in getting their license. Of course, the big benefit here, not only can you talk to astronauts and track satellites and communicate with others around the world, you can do fun stuff like this as we look to send stuff around the world, but probably most importantly, as citizens, they can be active in a disaster, fire, flood, earthquake. Your first responders quite often are aided by your ham radio operator. So just share that. And that was always a lot of fun. I think we're going to have another one planned for one of the teachers, Trevor McDuff in Washington, is planning for an Equinox launch. If anyone wants to do that, we have to just kind of coordinate the equipment and what have you. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, but we're going to try to launch it all at the same time, around the world on Equinox. So coming up in spring. So get ready for that. I guess we can sense, not related to the space station, but it's fun, right? There you go.
Yeah, it's a good COVID thing to do for the students. I want to, on Eris's behalf, I want to thank Joanne Michael for coordinating the race. It was and the lesson plans and things like that, and Ted and Liam and Trevor for all of their efforts to make it successful. It's all done with APRS, Dan. So and anyone can watch it on the internet and see it, see where it is and watch its telemetry.
Yeah, and it brings up an important point that I kind of think of these concentric circles, that our core is supposed to be space station, doing things with space station, yet it's a semi-permeable membrane. The fact is that this kind of balloon launches and then that connects up with whatever other interests there might be. Our goal is to inspire and engage kids and have them do real science, and using ISS as a catalyst, directly or indirectly. And so the balloon launch is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone to space station. It's their first reach into space station.
Exactly. And what you guys were discussing earlier about literacy and numeracy, especially with the younger grades, as the balloon goes around the world, you've got history lessons in there, social sciences, obviously Earth observation. So a lot of fun things you can do. I recommend that we find ways to extend that on our space station experiments as well. A lot of teachers really, especially in the K through 8, I find it difficult to find science, especially during the pandemic. And when we can map it back to the core things that they're being tested on, the mathematics and the language arts, they find a way to bring the science to the classroom. So if we can work together on something like that, I'm open to, if anyone has some interest, please reach out. Let's find ways to collaborate and bring the sciences through the lens of the mathematics and through the language arts. I think we get more teachers involved and engaged. And they, for any that are apprehensive about science, like they didn't do well in school or what have you, or even though they're teachers, we get them comfortable again. We can show them the excitement. Maybe we can stoke that curiosity a little bit more.
No, that's awesome. I know I wanted to let you guys know there were a few people that said they had to duck out. They had hard stops at 3 and had to leave. But if anybody else had to leave, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to continuing these discussions tomorrow. I hope all of you are able to join us again tomorrow and Wednesday. Dan, did you have any other closing words, or was there anybody else that had any comments, questions, discussions? No? All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same link, same everything. All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.